as we head to the 2026 World Cup, which, of course, seems to have been controversial before we've gotten anywhere near that because of the politics of the landscape. But the idea that Gianni Infantino and Donald Trump are bosom buddies, is that footballing politics or is that political football?
I think it's beyond this, really. I mean, it is worth spelling something out here. Like, this World Cup, I mean, already it's unprecedented because it's going to 48 teams and it's going to cross 3 countries. But the situation with 3 countries, I mean, usually in the build-up to a World Cup, when there is co-hosting, and so we've already had really Japan, Korea, but say you got the example of some Euros, say, there's a kind of a spirit of cohesion, of the countries coming together. In this case, we've got the unprecedented situation of Trump, one of the presidents, initiating a trade war against his co-hosts. Now, that mightn't necessarily...
That might be true, but it still sounds mad when you say it out loud.
This is it. It's absurd. And like that even mightn't necessarily be as much of an issue because for all of modern football history, every single World Cup has been organised by, say, or it's been the actual football federations of the countries have been centrally involved and there's been a local organising committee. This one... And I think this is relevant to the fact that America is so commercially attractive. It's one where the federations have actually been sidelined and FIFA are going in directly and working with the country.
Now, what does this say for FIFA? Because normally, it's one of FIFA's central tenets or international football's central tenets that if there's governmental interference with the role of a federation, then that team is removed from world competition or suspended from world competition. So for that not only to be tolerated, but actually aided and abetted by FIFA is extraordinary.
Yeah,
right?
There's all sorts of inconsistencies there anyway. I mean, I was on a call about the independent regulator last week, Rick Parry, the head of the EFL, and he was talking about how FIFA don't seem to care about issues of state interference when suddenly kind of some sports minister from a Gulf autocracy is placed in front at the head of the Football Federation. So suddenly that there's always a blind eye turned to that. But of course then there's another dimension to all this, which is not just that this is happening and FIFA going into this World Cup like this, but that Infantino is stood beside Trump and not even standing there impassively as Trump is saying things like tension between the countries might help the World Cup. Infantino standing there nodding and then saying yes or yeah or whatever it was he said. I mean, it's genuinely it's sort of staggering, or it would be staggering if it wasn't consistent with everything else going on in the world, which is of course what frames this, and also has influenced another precedent here, which is just how much Infantino seems to be cozying up to or have developed strong relationships with figures of along a certain political spectrum, like Trump, like Putin,
it's
like
not
Mohammed
new, is
bin
it?
Salman. And people might...
No.
So one response to this might be that, okay, in the case of where his World Cup is being held in a country like America, he has to cozy up to a president as idiosyncratic as Trump. Except the grand counter argument to that argument is it's not like he was cozying up to Joe Biden's administration or potentially Kamala Harris's. There wasn't the same relationship there. In fact, someone recently put to me that there is an argument that Donald Trump is one of the most influential people in modern football history because it was him and his administration, partly through Kushner, his son-in-law, who was central to the 2018 World Cup, the initial bid for 2026 World Cup in 2018. It was them that introduced Infantino to Mohammed bin Salman and obviously has set off all sorts of other influence. And what we're getting into here, and there is a good book about all this called States of Play by someone in this room. But like what we are getting into here is this kind of evolution of football into this truly globalized game where its twin poles are going to be Riyadh and New York. And I think there's another interesting parallel that a lot of, and I know, like, and this is very relevant as opposed to specifically this podcast and on the continent, because I know for a fact that a lot of European leagues, a lot of domestic leagues are very worried about the direction of travel, very worried about the amount of money that's going to come through the Club World Cup, which, as we know, like it indirectly come from Saudi Arabia through the DAZN deal. But they fear that what this summer, the 2025 Club World Cup is going to start, is the move towards a truly globalised football. Because given the money that's going to be enough from this Club World Cup, that suddenly changes the negotiation at every level of football about kind of like where your priorities lie, what the potential money is. And if clubs can be involved in this competition, now it's supposed to be every 4 years, what's going to happen next? There's going to be a push for more frequent versions of this competition. And this comes at the same time, of course, we have La Liga talking about games in the USA. Other domestic leagues aren't talking about it so openly, but they're all thinking about it. And I think it's interesting that we're at a point where obviously a lot of the current political paradigm is all of these right-wing figures talking about we need to end globalization, and that their influence is creating a world where football is going to become increasingly globalized. We're essentially going to see some sort of floating international version of football based on traditional, and let's be fair, traditional kind of European identities, because they're still the biggest clubs, but they all want to play. They want to be where the money is, which is now America and Saudi Arabia. I mean, they probably don't want to play in Saudi Arabia as much, but they very much would like the Saudi Arabian money tap to gush towards them.
Just explain this to me. And by the way, I didn't write States of Play. Did you write it, Andy?
No, I didn't.
Well, I'm just checking. Just explain this to me, though. What's FIFA's role in this? You mentioned that FIFA are going straight to the president and to the state rather than going through the football federations, unusually. What difference does that make? Cutting out the football federations, going to the states.
So
what will it make?
In every previous World Cup, or sorry, all the recent modern World Cups, there's a local organising committee which basically does all the logistics, all the difficult stuff to make a tournament run smoothly. For this one, they've got rid of the idea of a local organising committee, and FIFA are doing it themselves. So it's basically so FIFA have to take on all that responsibility, but B, it provides them for much more of a direct line to American cities, which is pretty relevant to, certainly if you're trying to put on a Club World Cup or future Club World Cups. Now, of course, there's all sorts of interesting politics there, given a lot of football's heartland in the US, and a lot of the cities where these games are going to be played are Democratic rather than Republican. So there's so much swirling around there. But of course, the bigger thing with FIFA here as well is, I mean, like, what are FIFA supposed to be? They're supposed to ultimately be they're supposed to be the ultimate regulator in the game, the ultimate safeguard for how the game is run. But rather than acting like that, they've made themselves players in football's race, because what's happening here? They see how much money the Champions League makes, and they think, well, we want our own version. And I'm always kind of tempered by this as well, because obviously more money, more of the massive money football generates needs to be spread around, needs to be spread from Western Europe around the game. And from that idea, the principle of a Club World Cup is, it would be noble, but I think this version of it works against that. And in fact, all it's going to really do is increase financial disparity in football. It comes down to what this is actually all about, and as many people in football believe, it's essentially about strengthening Infantino's power. Because if he can hand out more money, or if he can increase money to all of the kind of member associations and national association of FIFA, well, they're going to repeatedly return him to power.
So going back to that, and going back to Infantino's role, do you think Trump becomes a prominent figure in this? And I know what you said about Kushner and MBS before. Does Trump become a player in this? Does he become a real figure in this? Does he have any interest in this if he's not flattered to this extent?
Well,
by Infantino.
There's potentially a bit of you could almost look at this as a bit of a quid pro quo. Trump's administration is allowing Infantino's FIFA essentially kind of almost a first mover advantage in this massive market of the US, just as it's about to really accelerate. Mm-hmm. And what's that in exchange for? Well, it allows it to become basically Trump's World Cup, the MAGA World Cup. I mean, we are talking about quite classic sports washing there. And like that is obviously of great benefit to Trump. Now, it's very interesting, like where I say Maurizio Pochettino's US men's national team fits into that, given we interviewed him last week and he was talking about how like suddenly the pressure can suddenly increase if Trump gets attuned to all this.
I guess that's another question, isn't it? How does Trump, if he puts his face there and he's already said he's going to be at a load of World Cup games, just like he was at the Super Bowl that he wouldn't normally be at, going back a couple of months, how does he react if the US national team tank?
These are losers. It's not hard to predict, is it? I mean, that's how he thinks. That's how.
Although,
is he really going to grasp context? Like, well, we've got like it's our football culture isn't as developed as other major nations.
Well, although he does know a bit about soccer because he knows who the king of soccer is.
Well, yeah, Infantino.
You're right there.
Jesus.
You're right.
I
qualifies it with, I guess.
When does words, or in a way or something like that. Yeah. I think
in a certain way.
There is a lot of talk that Baron Trump is genuinely a proper football fan.
So there's hope yet.